Let's Talk, These Walls Can Talk 3, this book. But to get to that, we're going to go through these two. So we're going to start right at the beginning. These Walls Can Talk was originally a stage play that Erin Mallon had written. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it was actually performed on stage the night before the world shut down for the pandemic, and we were all in such a time of unrest and unease and not knowing what to do for the best and stuck at home and isolated, and Erin decided I should do something to help entertain people. And she did. She got together these amazing voice actors and an author to join forces and do a Zoom in the Facebook group Oral Fixation. If you are a romance audiobook fan and you're not in this group, you're missing out. You should go join. But for me, I was always so grateful that they chose to do this, because we were isolated, we were unsure, some of us were sick. It was a difficult time, but it was also a difficult time for all of the talent involved. They were going through the exact same things we were. They were isolated, they were unsure, and for some of them they didn't even know if they could keep working because they were going out to studios and all of a sudden they couldn't do that. So, but even knowing that, they still took their time to entertain listeners, and I think that's amazing, and it just shows the type of people that they are. So the cast. Look, if I had to pick a cast of people that I would want to entertain me, this is the cast. Yeah, sure, I'd add a few additions because, you know, I can't just narrow it down. But bare bones, this is who I would have. And we're talking like through all three of the books. But that first book, that Zoom, was hilarious. If you have watched it, you know what I'm talking about. It was just outstanding. And so even the fact that they brought in an author, which was Amy Dawes, like, I'm not joking when I say I would listen to Amy narrate an audiobook because she did so great with it. And it's funny because when you listen to these books through all three, you find it hard to imagine that these characters weren't written with these narrators in mind, because they are just so connected with the person that they're playing. For example, Cameron, who is performed by Shane East, I cannot imagine anybody else. And even when I was listening, I was like, how has this not been written for him to play? Because there's too much of a connection with it. And it was so, and I'll get into his performance a little bit later on, but there are some things that are uniquely Shane, should we say. And the fact that they were written the way they were, it was like, are we sure? But I have been assured that no, that wasn't the case. For the first book, none of the cast, it hadn't even been thought of. And even when they did the Zoom, which, I mean, it was brilliant. There was technical difficulties, which just added to the awesomeness of it. And that sounds really weird to say, but it was so relevant to the time we were in, where we were all figuring out how to work remotely, how to Zoom and keep connections, and if we lost connect, and it just added to that whole pandemic situation that we were in. And it was one of the most entertaining things I've ever watched. And like many people, I wanted to go back and see it, and I was asking for the audio play, and I know other people were too. And Erin has said she had no intention of putting it out as an audio play, but people kept asking, and because she's awesome, she delivered. And boy, did she deliver. She brought all of the cast back that did the Zoom, and Amy Dawes did step aside to be replaced with Tanya Eby, which, I mean, sidebar, I mean, this is going to be a hot mess, so I hope nobody watches this. But if on the off chance Tanya does, I just want to say a huge congratulations, because she's just hit 1,000 audiobooks. 1,000! Like, what? That's like mind-blowing, and it's amazing, and that's such an amazing achievement, and a huge congratulations. But please stop watching now. And so you have, for the whole cast, so you have Cameron, who is an author, a non-romance author, and he is played by Shane East. Then you have Vera, who is a listener, who is performed by Arndt. You have Neil, who is an engineer, who is performed by Teddy Hamilton. You have Jennifer, or Niffer, who is a new audiobook narrator and is performed by Emma Wilder. Then you have Georgia, who is a romance author, who is performed by Tanya Eby. And like, everyone sat at home now who knows anything about this and are like, you did not just blank on this person. And yes I did, but I'm making up for it, okay? So we then have Atticus, who is a very well established, very well known and sought after audiobook narrator. He is known as the Narwhal, and he is performed by Joe Arden. And then in book 2, we are also introduced to Frankie, who is Atticus's girlfriend, and that she's played by Erin Mallon, who also narrates all 3. So she sets the scene for every scene throughout the 3 books. And we also have Andrea, who is Jennifer's wife, and she's a very smart lady, and she's performed by Maxine Mitchell. And then in book 3, we are introduced to Artie Smarts, who is an AI and is performed by no other than Jason Clarke. And I say that because I don't know that anybody else could have carried that off and done such, but more about that later. So that's the cast, and even just saying all those names out loud and how being like they are all on this project, it's amazing, because it is such a talented group of people, and they all bring something uniquely them to each character. And this goes back to what I was saying about how each character feels like they're written with that voice actor in mind. And Erin has said books 2 and 3, that is the case. But in book 1, that wasn't. And it just, you wouldn't believe it. It just, the 3 books flow so seamlessly that you would think they had all been written with that in mind. One of the things that I love about these audio plays is how well they are written. Erin's writing is so funny, and sometimes you forget some of the little things that I said, or you miss them the first time around because they're embedded so smoothly. One of the things I love to say about Erin is that her writing is very layered. You, on the surface, you're getting a rom-com if it's one of her novels, or it's a comedy with these books. But what you're actually getting is a very cleverly thought out book or play, which, yes, is hilarious, and let's not mistake that, because it is. But if you pull back some of these layers, you find things that make you think, that make you stop, that make you question, and I absolutely love that it does that. These books are an ode to the romance audiobook community. There's no other way to say it. It's such a joy, and I think that's the best way to describe it. These books are a joy to listen to. I've actually today listened to books 1 and 2 again, and because I knew I didn't have a lot of time, I didn't want to start a new audiobook, and I needed something light-hearted, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna listen to these. And again, I laughed so much, but there were moments where I stopped and was like, oh, okay, she went there. And you do question yourself in, like, did I notice that last time? And it is extremely well done that sometimes you don't notice it the first time around, or you notice it but you don't give it the attention that it deserves. And I love that about it. I love that I can listen to these books and have them be funny and a view behind the curtain, so to speak, in the audiobook industry, but that it's also showing us behind the curtain of the audiobook industry. And here are just some of the things that are dealt with in these 3 books, and when I tell you these things, you'll understand what I mean by the layers that Erin places in and how you peel them back, because these are just funny. But here are some subjects that are also featured. The way some listeners are spoken to regarding their choice of listening to romance. The way listeners are spoken to for their choice of listening to audiobooks. The way that people in our lives don't understand sometimes why we like what we like. The pay discrepancy between male and female narrators. The way that certain jobs are not viewed as important because they are behind the scenes. The AI conversation that is happening right now and is so prevalent in the audiobook industry, and how not everybody shares the same opinion on it. the boundaries or lack thereof, both ways, from a listener standpoint and also from a performer standpoint. Sometimes you have to have that boundary in place, and you can forget that sometimes, or brush it off because it's not a big deal. And I love that all of these things are included. And one of the other things is how a partner can get so caught up in their own head and in their own work that they can forget the other partner, or forget that other partner may have a voice or want to change things up. And I just thought it was so well done to include those serious subjects, but in a light-hearted, funny way. And one of the things that I think about these books is that it also shows a lot of self-growth for some of the characters. And I think it's so important to show that, because we are all always learning and always growing and always moving forward. And Erin is just so good at blending that all in and doing it in a light-hearted, funny way, but still raising those points. So Erin narrates all 3 of the books. So when I say she narrates, she's setting each scene. So at the beginning of each scene, she's telling you what's going on, so you know where to go from there. And in book 2, she comes in as a smaller part of the character of Frankie, who is the narwhal's girlfriend. But what I loved about the character of Frankie is how she was a contradiction. How they thought she was one thing and expected her to be a certain way because of it, without actually just asking or coming out and having a conversation. And I love that, because, you know, Atticus is so trying to hide who he is and parts of his life because he thinks she won't understand, and it turns out that she's super excited about it, and I love that. And going into book 3, we see a little bit more of her, and her interactions with the different cast and characters was so thrilling, because she was such a lovable character. And I think we've all been there, where we've been misinterpreted or misunderstood, or people have thought we're one thing but we're another. And keeping on the thread of smaller parts, Maxine Mitchell, who plays Andrea, Jennifer's wife, in the second book, again it's a smaller part in book 2, and at that point she's a stay-at-home mum, and she decides she's going to write a book because there's not enough lesbian fiction out there. And that's another thing that is brought up in this, is like, people won't really read FF fiction, but they'll read MM. This doesn't make sense. And so she decided she's going to write it herself, and I think that's fantastic. And you know, what's that old adage? If you can't find a book that you want to read, write the book yourself. And so she does. She sets out to do that. And you know, she's trying to be supportive of her wife, who has become popular and has increased from the first book, and we see that progression of that character. And I love that Erin chose to use a lesbian couple as opposed to another makeup of couple, because it is lacking in the romance community, and I love that that was a part of it. And speaking of Jennifer, Emma Wilder is fabulous. I mean, I love listening to Emma, and I think she's a master queen of accents. She blends really well. Blends, is that the right word? She just, you know, she almost seamlessly can switch between the accents that she does for different characters, and I love that about her. And with Jennifer, she, you know, she comes in book one, and she's got a little bit of an attitude about her because she's new to audiobook, she's new to romance audio, and is kind of looking down on it a little bit, and because it's new to her and she doesn't understand. And through her interactions with people that have been in the business longer, she learns more about it. And I think that's so important to show as well, because a lot of people don't understand what the romance community is like. It is not like any other community that is out there, and that can both be a good and a bad thing. And she, or Niffer as we call her, was just, the thing she came out with, the way it was delivered, was just so spectacular. And I loved all three books and her character's progression of book one starting out being a bit, then book two she's a lot more popular, and then book three is, you know, that continued progression, and actually now her job is at risk because of an AI. And I really loved that. Arden. Joe. I'm not always the most positive when it comes to Joe. Now don't get me wrong, there are two things I think Joe does exceptionally well, and I will always give him credit for that and suggest him for these types of books. So books that are high emotion, because he's one of the best at giving that emotional performance. And these are comedies, but there are some key points where you actually have that moment of vulnerability, and he does that so well. And another thing that he does really well is comedy, so this is brilliant for him. And he was just so funny, and he does this female voice. Oh my god, the first time I heard it, I'm gonna get real with you, I thought I was gonna wipe myself through laughing. I didn't, just in case anyone was worried. But it is so bad and so funny, and every time I talk about it I give a disclaimer, like, if this is your introduction to Arden, this is not what his female voice sounds like, because he's just so good that even when he's bad, he's good. And his character is just so out there. He's so cocky, so hey, I'm the best there is, suck it thing. And are there narrators like that out there? I'm sure there are. But even if I knew who they were, I wouldn't be telling you because that's not appropriate. Boundaries. But I think it's great for listeners to see that side, and sometimes listeners can give a lot of power to voices that they enjoy. And so I think seeing something like this and listening to it and seeing the interactions with the co-workers and is just a good reminder that they are people and that they're doing a job, and that they don't have to be particularly nice to still do a good job. And Jo delivers 110% in all three of these books. But there is a rap in this book that the majority, if not all of the cast participate in. I had tears streaming down my face. It was the most hilarious thing I've ever experienced. It was so funny. And Shane East plays Cameron, and Cameron is this stuck-up writer. I was going to use a different word. He's a writer. I can't remember the full title, but it's a sci-fi thriller with epic fantasy. I think it's an epic fantasy sci-fi thriller with time travel elements. If I got that right, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back, because there is yeah, if I got that right, because that is a long title, and if I got it wrong, well, I'm not surprised. But you know, so he's a serious writer. He doesn't write very much, he's serious, and he's rude to people, and it's funny because, you know, Shane East is a go-to British voice. People, and I've had people say to me like, oh my god, I want to come visit you so I can listen to people sound like Shane. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to find anybody where I live that sounds like Shane. And in fact, probably in 3/4 of the country, you're not going to find anybody that sounds like Shane. That's not a bad thing. That makes it uniquely him. And it really feels like he was born to play this character. He has that kind of voice that's suited to the attitude that Cameron has and the way he delivers it. There's a line that he delivers in when he finds out his wife is listening to an audiobook, and it's so derogatory in its delivery that there's no way you can misinterpret what he thinks to audiobooks. And like I said, I think we've all experienced that from somebody, and he has that same sort of attitude for romance as well. But we see his progression in the first book, where he starts connecting with other people. He has some brilliant scenes with Tanya Evie as Georgia, who kind of opens his eyes a little bit because she's his wife's favourite author, and she kind of puts him in his place a little bit, and it's like, whoa, dude, maybe this is why you're having issues. And he starts listening and paying attention to his wife, and you know, we progress without telling like the whole story. He progresses and is better in the way he is, and in book 2 we sort of see that as well. He's got his book published, it's out there, and the audiobook is out there, and you get a little bit of tension between the audiobook narrators and him, and then into book 3, where he's gone off the deep end. He's gone off the deep end and decided to go the AI option. I mean, let's face it, if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Cameron, because Cameron is the type of author that is like, hey, I'm getting my book in audio and it's not costing me thousands of dollars, so I'm going to do it, even though listeners don't want it. And I maybe put my own opinion about just a little bit, but it's also true, and there are authors out there like that, and I think showing that was so poignant with what's happening right now. But I don't think it would have worked. So if it was Georgia, I don't think it would have worked. It had to have been Cameron, and I really love that. Andi as Vera, I don't really think there's much we can say about Andi that hasn't already been said. She is just phenomenal, and I love her. And it's so funny because I think every listener at some point has connected with Vera in her capacity. And it's funny because I know I connected with her on a level, and I know a friend of mine also connected, and we're both like, Vera was not written about us, right? Erin's not following us, she's not like keeping an eye on what's going on. For me, what I loved about it was, you know, in book 1, we've got Vera. She's a listener, she loves audiobooks, she finds the social media of her favourite narrators, she has a conversation with him and she meets him, and that progresses into book 2, into she is now working in the industry, and that then progresses into book 3, where she is helping her writer husband with his books. And so here's a little insight into Kelly's life. I was a listener. I then progressed into working in the book industry, and I then also helped my husband with his book. I think you can see why I can feel a bit of a connection with Vera. But not only that, but I have been very fortunate to interact and meet some amazing narrators, one of which was Andi, which was a highlight. And I feel kind of bad saying that because I also met Shane at the same time, and it was lovely meeting him because I had listened to him for a long time, and you know, he's my country people. But Andi's queen. There's no way around it, and she's such a phenomenal talent. I mean, she's so multifaceted. It's like, is there anything she can do? Oh, sorry, anything she can do. If it is, I don't think we found it yet. But to have Vera doing all these things, and I'm like, oh my god, this is my life, this is what has happened. And I just really love that about it. And I think even if you haven't gone through all the stages, even when she's doing these other things behind the scenes or helping her husband, she's still deep down just a fan that loves listening to audiobooks. And I think that's what it boils down to, and I think that's why so many fans connect. And the way she's performed is just, it's all of us. Now, moving on to Georgia, who is played by Tanya Eby. Tanya is fabulous, and as Georgia, oh, it was just everything. Georgia is so funny. So Georgia is a romance author, and we first see Georgia, I believe, in a cafe where she meets Cameron for the first time, and their interactions were just chef's kiss. He's stuck upself, and she basically calls him on it and is like, "What are you doing, dude?" And talks to him about the fact that basically what he's writing isn't any better than what she's writing. They're just different genres. And, you know, she makes an important statement how everyone writes romance books. They just don't market it as such. And she's not wrong. If you take most books, there is a romantic thread in them. It just may not be the main focus. And she has some amazing interactions with Neil as well. Tanya and Teddy Hamilton are just everything. So, you know, she's the author in book 1, she's had a baby, she's producing her audiobook, she's going and checking out while they're recording, and she meets up with Neil, the engineer, and, you know, they have a bit of a fling. And then in book 2, it's, I think, a year later, they're married, and things are changing. So she's very frustrated, and the way they connect and clearly love one another but are struggling, and I think about finding that balance, and I think a lot of people feel that way in a new relationship, and I think that is showcased really, really well and really funnily. Teddy Hamilton is Neil. It's like if you closed your eyes and tried to picture Neil, you would picture Teddy Hamilton. He is just, there is nobody else to play this role. He is Neil. So Neil's not a very nice guy, to be honest. Not a very nice guy towards women. But he's improving, he's trying to get better. And, you know, we meet him in the first book, and he has this big attitude and kind of overstepping a little bit when he's working with a new narrator, because he can. And I think we've all known people in positions that overstep because it's somebody new. And I thought that was showcased really well. The way he delivered some of these lines was just hilarious. And the way he interacts with Tanya Eby as Georgia, but also it actually, although it starts off rocky, you see this friendship grow with Jennifer, Emma Wilder's character, which was just so sweet to witness. And you see that continue in book 2 and on to book 3, where they have such a good, wonderful bond, and to see that progression was just brilliant. And I think that's what I love so much about them. the progression, and you really see that for each of the characters. Now, Atticus is an AI, and he's performed by Jason Clarke. Now, I'm gonna have to be honest here, so let me get situated to talk about this. I have always said that I thought Jason Clarke was one of the most versatile voices in romance and that he could narrate anything. Clearly, my view of anything had boundaries that I wasn't aware of, because I did not expect this. It feels like Erin sat there and was like, hey, people think Jason can narrate anything. Let's see if that's true. And he delivered. He was like, hell yeah, I can do it. He brought his A game. I mean, he left nothing. The way he performed this AI, and this is just more evidence that we need human voices in audiobooks, because the way he performs this AI, only a human voice could do it. You know, you couldn't turn it around and have it be the other way. A human voice can sound like an AI, but an AI can't sound like a human voice. And the way he had those AI moments, but it was still Jason. You could tell it was Jason, but you're like, is it? Yes, that's Jason. And the nuances that made you connect and like this character. And you know, I had conversations with people who were doing early listens of it, and they were like, am I supposed to like this guy? I don't think we're supposed to, but how can we not? And that is all down to the performance. The only word I can think to describe it is spectacular and phenomenal. I have listened to a lot of Jason Clarke, and I think just because this was so different and so good, that I was just blown away. And I think a lot of people were, and they were like, this dude really can do anything. And it was such a joy to have those interactions with the other characters as well. There were some scenes with Shanice and Andi, and they were just brilliant. And you kind of also were sat there and you're like, how are they not cracking up at this? Because, you know, I've done books where Andi and Jason have performed. It sounded nothing like that. But it's funny because I know I said it and I've had other people say it to me as well, and they're like, I was almost swayed to the side of AI assignment. But let's not get crazy. But it was that good how it was performed, and it was so fun. So if you were still here, like, well done. You deserve an award, a pat on the back, anything. But yeah, if you haven't done these audio plays yet, I highly recommend it. I mean, you can get the paperbacks, you can read you can read the ebooks, but I highly recommend listening to them. And I just also, before I go, wanted to also give a huge shout out to Tyler Whitlatch and Nick Long, who are post-production and sound engineers, because the way they put all of this together and gave it that little special thing that they do was just brilliant, and they deserve all the praise. And yeah, so great. And I know that if they run a project, I'm getting high class, high quality, and I'm going to enjoy it. And I will say that because I'm not a big fan of audio plays. It's not that I'm not a big fan of audio plays. I'm not a big fan of sound effects. But every book I have done, which has been an audio play that they have worked on, I have been like, yeah, this is cool. There was actually in book 3 a scene where I thought it was external noise, and I stopped my audio play thinking something was going on outside, and I thought, oh, it's nothing. I went back and it was there, and I was like, oh, and it made such perfect sense because they were outside, so it was outside noises, and that just stuck out to me because it was such a relevant part of it, and so I love that. So they're fantastic, so check out their work. So like I said, I highly recommend listening. If you want the paperbacks, you can get all 3 from Amazon right now. The ebook is, at the time of recording this, the ebook for book 3 is on pre-order, and the audio play is on pre-order. The paperbacks are also available to be signed via Erin Mallon's website, erinmallon.com. Just head to her website, go to the store, check it out. I always get my copies from Erin. She's really quick to ship them out, and you get a signed book from Erin Mallon. And yeah, so I'm hoping to get this posted the day before the book is live, but if not, it will already be live. But fingers crossed that won't be the case, and I'll have time to actually get it all together. If, like I said, if you have stuck around, I thank you. You must be bored out of your brain listening to me by now. But while you're here, I'm just going to double check what. Oh, I was close. It's a sci-fi thriller. No, it's not. It's a fantasy Oh my god, no, it's not. I can't even read the words on the page. It's a fantasy thriller sci-fi epic with time travel elements. I was close. I called it an epic fantasy. I was close. Anyway, check it out.